So this is Scott Auerbach. I'm here representing my own views and opinions. None of the things I say are necessarily the opinions or views of my employer. I appreciate the opportunity to be here on the Ray Agliata show and catch up with Ray.
Lisa and Scott. Scott's still active in the Air Force, and Lisa, we're thrown out of the Air Force, from what I understand.
No.
I'm technically a civilian, so I'm not actually active, but I'm employed by the Air Force.
All right.
Are you a GOV, like a GOV?
A GS, yeah.
Oh, GS. Okay, so yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Did you get to keep your same ranking? Like, did it transfer over?
No, it's different. I mean, you get to keep you get to keep your time. Like it kind of gets complicated with it, but you get what's called a service computation date, where your military service counts towards your total federal service, and so you accrue leave at a quicker rate. So like, what your leave rate is at 5 year when you first get hired on, and what it is at 5 years, and what it is after 10 years is different. And so your service time as an active duty member, when you get on as a federal employee, gets added to that service computation date. So you accrue leave, you get to those benchmarks quicker, so you can accrue leave faster. And and then you can buy your military time back, and that can get applied to your federal retirement as well.
Okay, so it all transfers.
Yeah, a good bit of it. Yeah, a lot of it. Yeah.
Well, that's convenient, because I remember how complicated it was to just accrue leave and all that. So it's at least nice you get to, it literally pays off for you.
It does. Yeah. In the end, eventually when I get to retire. Yep.
Good.
So since we're recording, we can say the podcast has already started. So Scott, welcome to the show. And I introduce you to Lisa. Ray. Nah, man, I appreciate you coming on. I know we got to jump through a couple of little hoops here on your end, but I do appreciate it. And super cool. And the last time you were on, I think we talked about some pretty cool stuff. We talked about how you talked about high school. Last night we were all hanging out with Mike Matissa. He was, you remember Mike, right?
I do. Yeah, absolutely.
So we were hanging out last night. He was on the podcast a little while ago, and he has an awesome wife, Carly.
Yeah. She's getting up there as far as getting recognition for singing, right?
Yeah. She's a great singer and super Batman fan and all of that kind of stuff, which makes Lisa happy because she's also a
big Batman fan.
Yeah, I have a problem.
It's all right. It's all good. We all have our little hangups, right?
That's true. This is true. Very true.
So these two on that podcast, they were talking about Nightwing, Batman, all this. I was like, Jesus Christ. Like I felt like, I wasn't nerdy enough to be on the podcast,
Right.
Well, I mean, the only thing you affiliate with Batman is friggin' Christian Bale.
Oh, my God. That's my man crush. Scott, I have a man crush, Christian Bale in the Batman days. Straight man crush. Yeah, no, that is what it is.
I think if you were to ask anyone that sees my social media or talks to me in real life, if there was a man crush I have, and you probably already know this, it's almost certainly the answer would almost certainly be Ryan Reynolds.
Oh yeah, yes, that's solid choice.
Like the dude doesn't make a movie I don't love. All right, there's a couple out there that probably shouldn't be watched more than once, but I'll at least give every Ryan Reynolds movie at least one watch.
Well, hold on. There is that statement where they say that was Ryan Reynolds' Green Lantern bad. So he was in one of like the worst movies ever.
Wasn't his fault.
It
didn't say it was his fault. I'm saying he was in the movie that people refer as not being as bad as that.
Right. I actually enjoyed Green Lantern quite a bit, and I guess it was about maybe a year ago. He says he finally watched it for the first time and enjoyed it.
I mean, he did meet his wife on the film, so it's not all bad.
Right. Yeah, how bad can it be, right?
Now, are you a Ryan Reynolds fan or are you a Deadpool fan?
So I would say I'm probably a fan of both, because I think a lot of it is like, so I mean, you go back like I don't know, what is it, like 15, 20 years now. He did that Van Wilder. And it just his sense of humor seems to just like hit me right where I just laugh. The dude makes me laugh. There's just no question about it. Like whether it was Van Wilder or Green Lantern, or even I think I even watched one of the movies that I've only watched once with him in it was that R.I.P.D.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say, is that as bad as it looks?
Yeah, that was pretty terrible. I'm gonna be honest with you. But I think the first time I actually took notice of him as somebody that that I thought, I was like, wow, this guy's good, because Van Wilder was one of those movies you watch once and you can see the sense of humor there, but he had like a small role in Blade Trinity, the third one,
Yes,
the
he
third
did.
Blade movie, and just the few moments he had in that were hysterical, and the same thing with Wolverine Origins. He just had this small role in it, but he was hysterical,
Yeah,
and it was like so. And then when he came out with Deadpool, it was just like it was, one of those things where it's a match made in heaven that Ryan Reynolds got to play Deadpool, and they unleashed him to be the Deadpool he thought he should be, and just floored me. So I think I've probably watched that close to 100 times.
The true epitome of what Deadpool is. Ryan Reynolds literally,
Oh,
like, if you've ever, I'm sure you've read the comics, but literally it's Ryan, like, it's hard to differentiate between the two.
Right. Yeah,
Have you ever seen Just Friends?
I did. Yeah. We
That's
saw
such
it.
a funny movie.
We actually just watched it like a week or two ago.
It's a
It was one of
Christmas
those things
movie.
where it's like, yeah, we weren't like planning on watching it, but it was like we saw a Ryan Reynolds movie. We're like, all right, let's see what it is. And it was, we laughed. It was hysterical.
So fucking
type
funny.
thing. I joke with people that I don't think so. I actually did not read. I haven't read the comics. I'm purely a movie guy. And so my, like, all of my Marvel is based on the MCU, and I'll go back and like read some of the things on the web about what it really is like in the comics and whatnot. But I joke with people that I actually think Ryan Reynolds is no longer Ryan Reynolds, that Deadpool broke the fourth wall and took over Ryan Reynolds' life.
Totally plausible.
That's my theory. I'm sticking to it.
So you think Ryan Reynolds is really like Deadpool, like they're really the same person?
Yeah, like after Wolverine Origins, Deadpool said, "Dude, you messed it up letting him take my mouth away," and came out of the comic books and took over Ryan Reynolds' life. That's it.
Wait, AKA Wade Wilson.
That's correct. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
There you go.
Blake Lively is married to Deadpool.
Yeah. And they're creating little Deadpool babies. That's exactly what's happening.
It very well could be. Yep.
Did you see, are you interested at all in like his personal life, like with things like, didn't he just buy a soccer team and he owns some kind of cell phone company or something like that?
Yeah, he's got Mint Mobile. It's like I'm not interested in his personal life, so to speak, but he's almost ubiquitous now. You see him in commercials and everything all the time. So you start to realize that, he had this aviation gin company and he's got this Mint Mobile because the commercials come on enough. And I can't remember what we were watching, but it's on some channel where his soccer club has a show, and there's commercials about that. So yeah, I wouldn't say it's like I follow him explicitly. I don't follow him on Twitter. In fact, I don't follow any celebrities, politicians, or media people on Twitter at all. But yeah, he just seems to pop up in a lot of different places because he is so, just kind of into so many different things right now.
I know he has like a huge affiliation for entrepreneurship and advertising, specifically advertising.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you. He's very ubiquitous, as you said. But the Rex, I'm a big fan of Always Sunny, which the guy who partially created Always Sunny, they co-bought that Wrexham team in England. He just met
the other person.
Him and Rob McElhenney is the guy's name.
Yeah.
They just met the Queen, or not the Queen, excuse me, the King. The Queen's dead. Sorry.
Yeah. That's his business partner. And I think their wives were like, the fuck are you guys doing with this? Like buying a soccer team kind of thing. But he's really into it. Like, I think I'm just looking at his, right? Yeah, I'm just looking at his Wikipedia, and it said that he's to the point where they actually, when he made the movie Red Notice, they put it all in Welsh subtitles. So that must be his real, like.
Well, he's Canadian.
Yeah, he's Canadian, eh? So that must be his thing, eh? So that's that's interesting. See, for me, like, I kind of get into like some of these stars, but then they speak like outside of their roles.
Sure.
And then it just really bothers me.
Like, stay in your fucking lane, bro.
Yeah, like, dude, like, I don't want to hear your shit. Like, just, you're like my escape. Like,
dance, monkey, dance.
Yes.
I pay you to sing, not to hear your opinion on the world.
Right.
Nobody needs to hear that shit.
But I think about it and I'm like, and that's why I got into Formula One racing, which is going to sound odd, but like right before the pandemic, I got into it. And I started watching. I always followed it, but like from afar. But then I got really into it. And I got really into it because I don't know if those guys are not allowed to like state their opinion on anything or whatever the case may be, but it's very much an escape. It's like it's the sport of wealthy people.
Sure.
It costs hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, right, to race Formula One. But then when you follow the drivers or you follow the other people, there's never an ounce of controversy. There's never an ounce of you should do this or do that. You should kneel or you should not kneel. You should get the vaccination. So there's none of that. It's almost like these guys they don't talk about it. And I think that's fine because like when I read the articles for the, prior to the race, and then I follow the qualifying and I follow this for every race, and then I watch the race, it's like that block of time. I don't think about anything else.
That's cool.
I like that.
Yeah. So, yeah. I've always been kind of one, like it's weird. I find that the sports that I like to watch tend to be those sports that I'm just not good at. Like not even not good at, like so bad at that I would never even attempt. Right.
Sure.
And so I never felt like well, even a lot of the racing sports like NASCAR and F1, I would just rather be in a car racing. Sure. You know what I mean? And so I do these track events with my car, and I'm nowhere near as good. I'm not trying to say I'm as good as these drivers,
sure,
but the thrill that I get out of going around a track, even an F1 track, as badly as I am in comparison, is a million times more fun than watching it because it's more relatable. I think that way. I watching them go around the track, and I tried to get into NASCAR for a while. I took kind of a liking to Dale Jr. after Dale Sr. Died. I was like, kind of pulling for Dale Jr. to see him do stuff, but kind of like, once he won a championship, or I think it was maybe even Daytona. I can't remember which one it was, but there was one where I was kind of like, okay, I'm good now. I don't need to watch anymore. But the only sport I keep finding myself come back to watch, even when I don't want to watch it, is football. And it's because I'm not any good at it, right? Like there's never going to be a time when my 5'5" frame, right, is ever going to be capable of doing like anything that these players can do. And it's surprisingly so much more complicated of a sport than it initially looks. Like there's just so much going on, and the more I pay attention to it, the more complicated and intriguing I find it.
I stopped watching football because, to me, you do not kneel during the national anthem.
No, I'm with you.
We don't do that shit, right? Listen. You have the right to do whatever you want to do. That's sure. So I stopped football, and that was for years. And now I just came back to it this year a little bit. So
yeah, I mean it's hard to avoid when the Eagles are 12-1. But but the whole kneeling thing, so much of what the frustration for me with the kneeling thing wasn't so much that somebody would kneel during the national anthem. Look, part of being in the military is recognizing that people have the rights to express themselves, right? And sure. and being willing to risk it all so that people can express themselves. And so if the Colin Kaepernicks of the world or whoever want to kneel to express themselves in protest, I've got no issues with that personally. And quite frankly, you could argue that kneeling, the flag etiquette, I think, or the etiquette that's published for, national anthem is to be respectful. Well, they weren't actually being disrespectful, even though standing is what we expect as a demonstration of respect, right? Right. The problem I had with it was the NFL was saying that's okay.
Yeah.
But if you want to wear something in recognition of a cop, for instance, that was killed, well, that you can't do. That's a protest that we're not willing to support. But a protest, during the anthem, it is something we're willing to support. So I can see, I'm if if a private entity wants to allow someone to protest while they're working, I guess that's that private entity's call to do it. I am going to stand during the national anthem for sure, and it pleases me when I see everybody standing for the national anthem. But if some people choose to make that a protest, then so be it. That's their right, and whether I agree with it or not, that's a right. I'm hopeful we continue to defend.
I mean, I'm not Canadian, but every time I go to a hockey game, it always seems like we're playing a team from Canada, and they play out Canada, and I sing and whatever. It's good. It's just respectful.
Actually a really good point. That's a really good point.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not half. It's not half of the games, but you got Ottawa. There's a lot of teams that have it.
Is honoring two countries.
Sure.
Yeah.
What's wrong with that?
Nothing wrong with it.
Right. I'm sure you understand this because you've probably been overseas in a variety of places. Yeah. I know when I was stationed in England, when they would play the anthem every day, they would play the British and the American, and we would have to stand at attention attention and then saluting, for both. So you just you just should respect the country you're in. You may not agree with the politics, but it's more of a I think it's more of a respect factor. I agree with you, though. I'm more of a bitch about it. You're being more PC about it.
See, I look at it like all of that demonstration stuff. You have the right to demonstrate. You have the right to assemble. You have 100%. I'm 100% for it. But I think that there are so many better things that you can do, or so many better ways that you could use that energy than going around and either kneeling during the flag or protesting in some way. Again, 100% you have the right to do that. I'm on your team. Go do it. But man, could you use that energy instead of going out and marching and doing whatever? Could you use that energy to do something productive and better? Because once all that goes away, the city of Trenton still looks like the city of Trenton.
Right.
They could march up and down South Broad Street all they want. The city of Trenton still looks like the city of Trenton because nobody is doing anything to change that. And if they try to change that, then they're met with some things. And one thing that I noticed after years and years of being in the construction industry and whatever, I think a lot of these cities have inspection departments that make it very, very difficult for people to want to do business in those cities. And I think that like you're in the city of Trenton, for everything you need to get inspected and everything that you need to do, we had opened up, this is going back 20 years. We opened up a dollar store in the city in Trenton called Ultra Dollar. Right. I had an empty space. I said, I want to make a plan and do this. The ringer that they ran me through to open up Ultra Dollar. And I had it for a few years. It was like a fun project. It was like, it was cool. It didn't make a lot of money, but it was a fun thing to do. Like from architect's drawings to the shelves had to be hung in a certain way to this, to that, to whatever. If I wasn't the owner of that building, I would have been like, fuck this. You know what I mean? Like, and it got into what really was crazy with that particular neighborhood in South Broad Street was it was in a historic district. So you had anything that you did, you had to go in front of this historic committee. I want to paint the doors. Okay, well, you got to paint the doors. Here's a list of 20 colors.
Yeah, here's the rules.
And they all suck. Gunmetal gray, black, some
I'm a car guy. Gunmetal's okay.
Well, you know what I mean. But like you don't want to paint the bail bond store or the dollar store, some, revolutionary royal blue or whatever from 1776, whatever fucking these crazy colors were.
Revolutionary.
It was crazy, right? But then I got into the argument that I got into with some of these guys was, I want to replace the windows. All the windows have to be wood frame. Well, wood frame window costs $700, where a replacement window costs $200. I want to put a replacement window in. Oh, you can't. Why not? Oh, we have to make the buildings look like they're from like 1812. So in the meantime, half the fucking block is empty. with just boarded up buildings and disaster. And the people that are trying,
people can't afford to fix it. Yep.
They're met with such resistance. They are
Yeah.
met. But I'll tell you the funny how I end this story was I sold the building to a guy who literally did not give a fuck. And he did everything that he wanted to do. He put the windows in that he wanted to put in. They sued him. They went after him. He just had the staying power to just ignore them. And eventually, I think they went away. When I had one building where they wanted me to go to what was called the Trenton Toniana room. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's a room in the library in Trenton, in the main library, that has a picture of every single building in it throughout that building's history. It's fascinating. But who the fuck wants to bring a building back to 1902 using original materials?
Right.
Oh,
that probably fucking covered in asbestos and shit.
What the fuck you people talk about, right? But that was the stuff. And I think that if you want, instead of marching, I think you have to say, hey, mayor or whoever's in charge of this, let's try to make some changes here that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
I think
nobody does that because it's not sexy to do that.
I think so much of what we see today there's obviously legitimacy to the causes that people are animated by, right?
Sure.
But I think what you see is there is almost a professional class of activism that gets involved in these things. And just like the partisan politics and the media and big business, there is benefit in division, right? And an activist benefits from division because the more angry you can make the opposition, or the more angered you can make the opposition, the more noise you're going to get out of your issue. And so there is a degree of professional activism, for lack of a better description, these days that flourishes in and encourages this division amongst us, right? Amongst, we the people. And so when you see things like, the kneeling during the national anthem, or some of these other more outlandish methods of protest, a good piece of that is about making the people who don't agree angry.
Yes.
Right. And the more angered the other side is, then the more conflict and division it creates. The more conflict and division it creates, the more power that division gives to the people trying to control either side of the argument. Right. And so a lot of it, to me, and what I fear is a lot of it is there's almost an intent behind it that the more they can keep the people divided, the more capable the political parties is where I put most of the blame on, only because they're the ones that take an oath to us, right, and to the Constitution. The more they benefit from that division, right? And so if you can force everybody onto two islands, then the kings of those two islands are in charge. And both parties, right? They're you talk about right and left, for instance, right? The Republicans are right and the Democrats are left, right? And so it kind of, even just those words are divisive terms to try to fit us into, you're on the left island or you're the right island, right? Well, in reality, when you think about the Constitution specifically, right, it's designed to balance, nearest I can figure it out. I'm not a constitutional, expert or anything like that, but the nearest I can tell, the Constitution tries to balance this individualist kind of idea where you can be on your own and do your own thing, with the idea that you can also assemble as freely as you want to assemble and build these groups and let these groups live the way they want to live too, right? And so the Constitution really balances, in my opinion, not left and right, so to speak, but individualism and collectivism, right? It sets the balance between those two thought processes. And if you think about it in that respect, individualism versus collectivism, then you start to realize, wait a second, both political parties are collectivist ideas. And so they're both on the collectivist side of the Constitution. Neither one of them are looking at it on the individual side of the Constitution, right? Yep. And so if they're both on the collectivist side of the Constitution, then their attempt to divide us is the attempt to force all people into one of these collectives, which means none of them want us to be individuals.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, if you look at what happened with George Floyd and Black Lives Matter got almost $80 million. And if you look at how bad the town is, it's worse. After the riots, it's worse. They never fixed anything. So it's in worse condition than it was after the riots. So I'm okay with what I mean, I don't know. I kind of feel like him kneeling was the biggest part of his protest. If he was out there like not practicing or saying, I'm going to give my paycheck to this organization, never offered that, you know. Yeah. So, it's great if you have a good idea. Just maybe you follow through. If you get a Black Lives Matter and you're going to rebuild the city, at least make the city not look like a burnt out war zone, which is what it looks like right now.
Yeah.
They said the people never got it. $80 million. No one knows where it went.
Where'd it go?
No one knows where it went. It's secret. There's a good documentary on the Daily Caller, and they actually did a thing on this, and they have like all the people who ran it took the money, pretty much.
Wasn't BLM a movement?
Possible, right?
It is.
If memory serves, BLM was a movement like when Obama was in office, like in 2015. It was a movement. I remember because I remember at Penn State.
It started after. It started primarily like it really started after as a legitimate movement. I think it really started after. Oh God, which one was it? The
$90 million it has in 2020.
It was what was the one where the guy followed the did I lose you guys?
No, we're able to do cool stuff now that Rob's
we have
involved.
We have the technology, Scott.
We have the technology, Scott. Yeah.
It started after the case where that night watch guy kind of followed the 17-year-old Trayvon Martin. That's it.
Yep.
It started after Trayvon Martin,
the hoodie guy.
Which
oddly the hoodie enough, guy. You're right.
Yeah, it wasn't a cop. Right, he was a guy that was probably
wanted to be a cop.
Doing what he was doing. It was more of a neighborhood watch kind of thing.
Yes.
And then it kind of accelerated after Michael Brown. But there's a point where you can tell it really became a political tool, where it while it was a movement, and I think in a lot of cases, in a lot of ways, there was some goodness behind that movement because there are things that need to be fixed. In the way law enforcement, I think there's a lot of ideas out there that can make law enforcement work better. But I think when you went to donate to Black Lives Matter and it takes you to Act Blue, which is part of the Democrat Party, you start to realize that, oh, well, wait a second now, is this still the Black Lives Matter movement that it started out as? Is it still focused on achieving a goal? Whether you agree with the goal or not, is that still what it was doing, or did it just become another fundraising mechanism? And then were the funds that were raised, were they properly handled? I don't know the answer to that question. One of the things I really kind of, whether I pride myself on it or not, is the right answer or is the right description. I definitely really like to have good evidence. And unfortunately, we've gotten ourselves into this place in the country where our parties are almost synonymous with our news media, right?
Yes.
Yeah. You've got your Fox and your, what is it, Newsmax and OAN are synonymous with the GOP anymore, or at least the right wing, the quote unquote right wing. And you've got your CNN, your MSNBCs and whatnot that are effectively synonymous with the Democrat Party or the left wing, and so if they're all effectively in bed together, then they're all on these islands, right? They're all part of the same hierarchy, hierarchical collectivist model, right?
Well, Scott, you have to remember, controlling information is more powerful than money or than anything else. So, like with the BLM people, I think that their cause got hijacked by the Democratic Party. That's my personal opinion. I mean, I think that the people probably said, hey, this is a good idea. Let's do something with it. Then some activists really got involved and they're calling cops bacon and all of this kind of craziness, right? Remember, they were marching on the bridge in New York. And those were probably not the original intentions of Black Lives Matter. Then they got into the Democrats utilizing Black Lives Matter for their own stuff. In the meantime, people are just giving money to Black Lives Matter. They're not thinking about it. There is a website, though, I don't know the name of it, and I don't know if Rob can find it quickly, that tells you how much of each dollar you donate to a charity, how that dollar is utilized. Like, I don't want to speak out of turn, but like Susan G. Komen for the Cure is, probably one of the better ones. But then but by better, what do you mean? Does 100% of the money go to causes? There's a lot of profit in nonprofit.
Yeah.
And I served on a board of directors at 2 nonprofits. And while I can't have a fiduciary responsibility and I can't disclose everything that I know, I could tell you that if you want to hire somebody to be the president of your nonprofit, that's not a cheap thing to do.
No. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's people complain about I think what is it, the CEO for the Red Cross is like paid some exorbitant amount of salary or something like that. But just because it's a huge salary doesn't necessarily mean it's not appropriate. You know what I mean? You really have to kind of that's why I kind of don't get too kind of bent out of shape by anything I see in the news anymore. Because I need to see the evidence. So like, when pick a news channel tells me that X, Y, and Z said this, and it's something that's coming from a court case or something like that, well, then I'll just go pick up the actual information from the court and read it myself.
Yeah.
And 9 times out of 10, maybe even 99 times out of 100, there's a whole lot of nuance left out.
Oh, of course.
To what was reported, that was inflammatory and made me want to hate the other side more, type of a thing. When you actually go and dig into the real facts, you find out it's a little bit more nuanced than they made it seem, and you see it all the time. Like every day we get that. It's just a matter of how do you parse that bias that we see in the media to get to the actual facts. I mean, hell, I one of the things I asked on Twitter not too long ago was, what's the difference between something that's true and something that's a fact? And most people that I talk to, they really don't see the difference. Like, that there's an actual quantifiable difference between something that is true versus something that is a fact. And just that mere fact that there is a distinction between those things and people don't have an understanding of it gives even more power to those that have the control of the information. It's like you have a belief right now that Black Lives Matter was corrupt. And so that may be true, but you can't prove it objectively yet.
Sure.
Right. And because it can't be proven objectively yet, even if it's true, it's not a fact. Right. And so many people don't really think through things like that. And so there may be things that we see all the time that is a plausible explanation that is presented to us as fact, even though the evidence isn't really in view yet to determine that it is actually factual. And we get hung up on these things because people believe it so vividly. Like people are going to believe Trump is a racist as much as there are people going to believe Trump is not a racist, right? And you ask either one of those crowds that are vehemently believe either side of that, and they will tell you factually that he either is or isn't. And the reality is both can be true, but neither is factual. You know what I mean? Because both could be true. We don't know. We don't know what's in his head.
I'm always interested in, and well, I'm going to look at this chart, but I don't want to leave out the news media for a second. Why if CNN has such bad ratings, if MSNBC has such bad ratings, if nobody's reading newspapers anymore, why do people give a shit? See, I can't figure that out. It's like when they're saying my goal on the podcast here, and I haven't shared this with Lisa or Rob, but my goal is to have more viewers than Brian Stelter had on CNN.
You got to be getting pretty close already then, right?
I don't know. I'm just saying. We're doing all right.
Your goal was to get more viewers than Trevor Noah on The Daily Show.
Oh, yeah. Trevor Noah too. Fuck Trevor Noah. Yes, him too. If no one's watching them, why do we give them so much power?
By the way, I have to, as a journalist, as somebody who's studying journalism, Ray, I have to let you know newspapers are not as dead as people think they are.
No,
That's just
I
the
give you that.
media twisting it, as
I'll give you
per
that.
Scott saying. Like, it's giving you the narrative that the media wants you to think. Because trust me, there wouldn't be printing presses anymore if they could avoid it.
No.
Yeah,
I
it's
agree
just
with
more
that.
digital.
I think a lot of it too is like, where does the money go is who we get to see. And so if you know, the money promotes what the money wants to promote, and the person that is saying it happens to be who the money is promoting at that given time. I don't know exactly, you know, I can only guess, but I am certain at the root of all of it is money, right?
Oh yeah, I'm
and
sure.
where that money moves and how that money is pushed around. But I think there's also, I you know, I kind of laugh a little bit sometimes when like you'll see on Fox where they talk about how their ratings are blowing away the other companies and stuff like that. It's like, well, when you think about it though, all the other news media, or the vast majority of the other news media, are only competing with one narrative, right?
Yeah.
And so all those ratings are shared across this one narrative. And so, you know, MSNBC is competing with CNN, is competing with ABC and NBC and CBS and Washington Post and New York Times, and so that viewership, when you take all of that and combine it to Fox and the New York Post and the Washington Times, you end up getting half the country, right? Either way, it's half the country. But Fox's ratings are often so good because there's really not a whole lot of other options for something that isn't CNN, NBC.
Well, if you stop showing a CNN in the airport, that's the only place you ever see it on. Doctors' offices and airports. I have never seen Fox News or Fox Business ever. I've seen CNBC, I've seen all the other ones, but I've never seen Fox. And they just literally cut it right out. They don't even want to pretend like they're trying to be biased. They're like, we are not going to show you another side of an argument. We will not.
I don't remember where I was at. I think it was Louisiana. It may have been when I first got into Texas, but I was on my way. I was moving to Texas at the time. And on one of my many trips to Texas, moving my stuff and my family out to Texas, I stopped at a McDonald's, and on the TV, I was shocked to see was actually Fox News. And I'm like, it's like I don't think I'm in Northern Virginia anymore. You know,
I've only seen it in one place.
It was quite memorable.
I saw it in one place. I worked at State Farm, and I worked in Albany, New York. So I was commuting. I worked 1 week here where I live, and 1 week in Albany. And I did that for 6 months. And that was the only place where the cafeteria at State Farm in Albany, in their corporate office, had on Fox News. And I was actually blown away by that. I was like, wow, like, holy shit. But you're right, because one thing you said a lot of things right, but there's one particular thing that you said was the country's truly divided. When you look at voting, we all have a lot more in common than we think we do. But when you look at voting, because you only have two choices, we're truly divided.
Why? That's why you only have two choices.
That's 100%.
They make it impossible for you to even get funding. And now they're going to try to go the other way and say, even if you win the state, you don't win all electoral votes. They want to split up the electoral votes based on how many. If there's 100 votes hypothetically in one state, they want to say, I won 60, you won 40 of them. They actually want to do that.
That's interesting though, because how often does a Republican candidate in New York come close? But they never get the president. If you're running for president and you get 40% of the vote in New York, and your Democratic competitor gets 60%, if there's 10 electoral votes, which is more, but just pretend there's 10, the Republican should get 4 and the other guy should get 6.
Well, that would never happen because you have deadlock forever.
Oh yeah,
because the world. I think the world is split down the middle, man. I mean, I really feel like the world is either on one side of a line or another.
But is it like that in other countries?
That's a lot of what they want, right? I think that's a lot of what the politics and the partisans want. Is they want us to be split left or right. They want you to have to choose between one of these two islands to live on, right? Yep. Because if you can create a path, and if you go back and look at electoral law over the last century or so, particularly in America, you are going to see where the parties have actually worked together at the state level, at the local level, to make it more and more difficult for non-parties, for either a non-Democrat or a non-Republican to run as an independent or to run as a third party against these major parties.
But they don't want to do that. No one wants a Ross Perot. No one wants another Ross Perot.
No. Right. And so they've continually made it more and more difficult to be able to do those things. Right. Yep. And so the challenge is you have to somehow break through. Right. So the concept is this, is if the partisan duopoly, as some people call it, I often call it a diarchy, because I think it's closer to, being ruled by a party, for instance. Right. And so, you have a monarchy. Well, a two-party rule would be a diarchy. So this diarchy we have, right? It's a choice between these two hierarchies that get to run. And if you have a hierarchy that owns the White House, a hierarchy that owns the Congress, then you've effectively got a king, right? If the same hierarchy owns all of them, right? And so that's effectively what you've got, is you've got this rule sharing, this sharing of who's going to get to choose to rule the country. But it's been promulgated over decades, in over a century, of slowly creating laws that make it more and more difficult for real people to get involved. And part of what's done that is the Electoral College. Now, I personally like the fact that our founders thought the Electoral College was a wise idea, but what the Electoral College has created is this binary situation where if you have more than two parties, getting to that magic number is very, very difficult, right? But the problem, and when you peel back the onion, I think has happened, is the parties have made us focus more and more and more on the presidential election, to where the point that becomes the all-important election. When in reality, the election we should be caring about is the House of Representatives.
Yes.
They represent the people, not the president.
But people don't have any knowledge. I mean, people have no knowledge of that. I mean, all that information is great, but these people have no knowledge. I mean, like, if you took someone on the street and you asked them, I'm going to tell you the story. Well, the Democrats give all this money to people that are in need, and they give all this stuff. So if you go back in time and think about slavery, which part of the country wanted the slaves and which didn't? The Democrats are the ones that had wanted the slavery to the point where they fought a war over it. Okay. And now they are the darlings of the people in need. They are the people that when you need a handout, those are the people you would more associate yourself with than the right. And it's scary. It's scary that people don't even know that. They think the Democrats are the cat's meow, not knowing they fought a war not even 100 years ago that had to do with them not wanting to give up the slaves.
Well, a lot of that is in the 1960s. A lot of that's in the 1960s, right?
Sure. Yeah, because the civil rights movement and the civil rights, what the heck is it called? The act that was passed, the Civil Rights Act.
Yeah, they gave also, the government gave a lot of money in that period of time, and there was a Democrat in office. There was LBJ in office, and LBJ gave a lot of money to Democrats. And that's my opinion. Now, I don't know if that's true or if that's false, but I don't think they did any favors to anyone by let me rephrase that. I don't think that the Republicans did themselves any favors by how they acted in that period of time, but the Democrats were master marketers. So you went from the party of 150 years ago or whatever it was, fighting for slavery, to being the party that, relies on minority votes now.
That's right. The party that comes out and says they want to, the party that comes out and says we want to keep you all in chains. Joe Biden said that at a rally. They want to keep you all in chains.
He's a fucking lunatic.
Well, what I'm saying is that guy is in charge of the party that long ago meant something completely different of what it actually turned out to be.
Do you think, Scott, that or anybody here, Kirsten Sinema said that she's now an independent?
Right.
Do you think that that's political suicide for Kirsten Sinema?
No, I think in her current situation, my gut says, I think there's probably twofold, right? I think, or even more than that, but I think she's probably recognizing that she was going to get primaried as a Democrat regardless. When she runs to reelect in Arizona, right?
Right.
Because she's not progressive enough. She didn't go along with some of the progressive bills as much as she liked, and she was a bit of a thorn in the side on the what was the big money bill that they passed last year, where she got chased into the bathroom.
Oh yeah,
that
was
right?
Build Back Better, whatever the heck it was.
Yeah. So I think there's that on the surface, I think, is reality. She's saying it's like, well, I think I can better represent the people, political speech and whatnot. I get it. But the reality is people can call themselves an independent. Okay. But if she is going to caucus with the Democrats still in the Senate,
right,
then she's just calling herself an independent. It's just an electoral strategy so that it makes it more difficult. It makes the Democrats have to choose. Do we run somebody against her in the election and risk a Republican getting the seat, or do we just let her call herself an independent and keep someone out of the seat? So I think it was tactic. Obviously, I think just tactics on her part that probably advantages her more electorally. But if you're going to call yourself an independent and then caucus with a party, you're just a hypocrite. You're not really an independent. Right.
Well, there's three of them, Scott. There's three.
Well, how about all those people? How about all the press that Joe Manchin gets? The only reason why Joe Manchin gets any kind of press is because he is. Yeah, exactly. Because anytime you're the professional thorn in the side, that's what you are, right? You're there for these five guys, the blue, all the blue dogs. There's over the blue dogs and blah blah. All those guys are always in the middle of every situation. And that's what they want. And listen, the presidency's coming pretty soon. They might need a different vice president. And they may want, so she's kind of marketing herself at the same time as well.
But here's the thing. How much do you want to bet that all of these decisions, her decision to become an independent and Manchin's decision to hold out and whatnot like that, is all a negotiated tactic with Schumer and the leadership of the Democrats? Not because they want to help them, but because in a lot of cases, many of their own senators, for instance, don't want to vote a specific way with the progressive side of the Democrat Party, but they need someone in a state or a district in the House. They need someone in a state or a district that can stand up and be the thorn to prevent the vote, so they never actually have to take it to a vote and put Democrats on record for having voted for X, Y, or Z policy. Republicans do it too. I don't want to just call out the Democrats.
The equally
just as guilty, right?
Yep.
But that's what they do, is they will stage these swing votes. In my humble opinion, again, it's just an opinion. They'll create these swing votes because there's something that AOC is advocating for that she's getting a lot of press for. So we got to shut it down somehow without making it look like we don't agree with AOC, or we're going to lose our base. And so they get the one senator or the one congressperson that's in a district that can say, I don't agree, and therefore it's not going to pass, because that district happens to be a very purple district that's not going to lose that person's vote, right? Exactly. And so they can take that heat because they're not going to get voted out of office. It's all just smoke and mirrors, in my humble opinion. There's just so much gamemanship to it,
There are three independents in the Senate now.
Right.
Kirsten Sinema, the socialist Bernie Sanders. We all know how I feel about him. And the guy from Maine, right? King, isn't he the other independent? I think there's three of them.
In the Senate, you got Sinema. Who is the third one?
Bernie Sanders, and I think the guy's name is like Angus King, isn't he?
Yeah,
I'm going to look it up while we're talking. But the point I'm trying to get at is, why don't those three caucus together? So then you have a Republican caucus, a Democratic caucus, and an independent caucus. And then maybe you get somebody like a Joe Manchin who says, I could be an independent too, because people are going to vote. Joe Manchin, they could roll him out dead. And Angus S. King, there he is, independent. There's a lot of independents. Wait a minute. Some of these guys are these are people that
you have to look at the president ones.
These are president. But these are the two guys, King and Sanders, and then you have one more. You have Sinema now, that's an independent, right?
Right.
But why don't the three of them caucus together? Because then maybe they could get other people who are like-minded independents, and then you start a third party. I mean, and then everybody has the opportunity.
That's the thing, is they're not really independent. So like I talk about independent politics, I say legitimate independent, right? Yeah. I like to call it an anti-partisan, right? That's how I frame myself when people ask me my politics. I say I'm an anti-partisan constitutionalist. because I don't believe in the partisan system. I don't believe in a political party writ large. I believe in my own individual thought, and I want to be able to represent the way I think. And if I were going to end up in Congress, then I would want to be able to represent the entire district, not have to sell out to a specific party. And so if you're an independent in Congress, by name an independent in Congress, but you caucus with a party, then you're a partisan. You're just using the name independent. But the reality is, and why I think the House is so important is because the Senate has a natural check on it currently anyway, right? You've got the filibuster. And so getting anything through the Senate is already incredibly difficult and really empowers those handful of senators that aren't going to go along with a specific party until they get the right payoff. Let's be honest, that's what it is. Sure. Not alleging a crime, but it's until they get the right incentives, for lack of a better description, they're going to withhold their vote, right? So, but in the House, because it just requires a simple majority for everything to go, that House, and the parties know this, you can tell, because that House that chamber is the most susceptible to the partisans losing control, right? The White House is always going to be won by a Democrat or a Republican. The Senate is like 99% of the time, there's no way to wrestle the Senate away from one party or the other. It's going to happen that way. Okay. And the judicial system is going to be based on which party is nominating and filling the judicial seats. So you want to believe that the justices and the judges appointed in the lower courts are all going to exercise independent judgment because they're appointed for lifetime. And I think by and large, they probably do. Right. But they certainly get into those seats because they have an ideology that lines up with one party or the other. Of course. But the House, because it's just a simple majority, they know they cannot fully control who gets elected to the Senate. Right. Neither party can fully, or the House, neither party can fully control and that's why they spend so much time gerrymandering the districts, is to say, okay, I would rather know the other party is going to win this seat than risk neither one of us winning this seat. Right. Right. And they get to do that every 10 years. The census happens. They get to gerrymander the districts. And then hopefully in their mind, they've gerrymandered it in such a way that they're going to maintain more control for them. Or worst case scenario, they're going to maintain control for the other party.
It also serves as a safety valve, because if you had two parties and one got absolute power and there was nothing you could do about it, if all the power is made up by two groups, there needs to be a third that can pull away and give balance to the other side.
And that's the key question, right? Is like, so last House, the last Congress had a 5-seat majority for the Democrats. This House has a 5-seat majority for the Republicans. Tell me there's not 5 people in 435 districts somewhere in this country that can't beat both parties and get elected as a legitimate anti-partisan member of the House and deny both parties the majority. Think about that for a second.
Yeah.
If we had 6 members of the House that refused to caucus with either the Democrats or the Republicans, just 6, then neither party has control of the House.
Yep.
And if neither party has control of the House, they have lost everything that they can sell to big business, that they can sell to the media, that they can sell to for corruption, that they can do things to us, because they have no ability to even, you ready for this? They can't even elect a speaker if they don't have a majority. And so if neither party has 218 votes, then they're dependent on those 6 people to make the decision which party is going to get power. Right? Which speaker is going to get to be put into that seat. And so does
it scare people enough to know that the whole world is controlled by 545 people? When you think about the scariness of it, you have 435 people in the House, you have 100 senators, 9 Supreme Court justices, and 1 president. So 545 people control the entire world.
In a lot of ways.
It's scary. It's very scary that is true.
Let's put it in.
No, it's
context,
scarier that people don't realize.
Those 545 people have all the levers of power.
Yes.
Who actually controls it, right?
Well, no, we know that. Yes, of course.
545 people are willing to cooperate with on any given issue.
But the independence thing has always been there and will always be there because they always want to make sure that, like, the funny part about Donald Trump was, in my opinion, was he was the one president that if a guy who was a hardcore Democrat had a great idea, he would have backed it. I really believe that Donald Trump would have backed it, but they hated him so much. They hated him so much that they would not even work with him. And he probably would have been the only person to try something crazy with a Democrat. I really do fully, because he just believed in getting a deal. For him, it was like, oh, I'm a deal maker. I make deals. He liked making a deal. He didn't care if it was left or right. He didn't care. He just wanted to make a deal. Yeah. And I think the Democrats are going to rue the day that they wasted all their energy. They had a five seat advantage last time. Now we do. These guys all have shiny red ball syndrome. They can't get out of their own way because when they get the ball, they give you a story about how great it was to get the ball instead of doing something. You have a short amount of time in Congress, and I seriously think they need to change the supermajority out because I don't think you could get 60 people to agree on anything anymore.
Never.
I think what they should do is it should be a simple majority, meaning 51, and then what happens is during those 2 years, those are the laws that are in order. And if they don't get renewed, then they sunset automatically. Because I feel like we'll get nothing done. I don't feel like there's something out there besides they did it yesterday about to extend the budget so they don't have to talk about it for another 9 days or whatever, however many months it's going to be till they have to talk about the budget because there was a budget impasse again, and they just automatically. That's the only thing they all can agree to. By the way.
I think so much of the concern, right, is we know that if one party has the power to make it to where they always win from now on, they will, right? If they can figure out a way to make it to where the other party will never win control, then they're going to do that. Both of them will. I have 100% confidence that given the opportunity that either party could seize control forever, they absolutely would. So the problem isn't what we can do to fix the way our things work. The problem that we have to solve is how do we make the parties fix it for us? Because nothing is going to change as long as the parties are in control. And so any idea that we have, be it what's the ranked choice voting, be it term limits, the suggestion that you were just making, any of those things are going to require the parties to say, okay, we'll make that change to restrict our own power. It's never going to happen, right?
Never.
So we
never in a million years.
Right. So the first thing that we have to do to make any changes that will actually give the people more power is we have to answer how. And so what I've tried to come up with that idea is, how do we force them to make change? And the answer to that is, first you have to take one lever of power away from the parties, right? And so you've got 4 basic levers of power. You've got the president, you've got the House, you've got the Senate, and you've got the Supreme Court. Okay. Now, in theory, the Supreme Court is not a partisan entity. I want to believe that, but you guys make your own opinions on that.
Yeah.
All right. And so, and we can't do anything about SCOTUS. That has to go through the Senate. Okay. The Senate, in order to make any changes in the Senate, you need an entire state, the majority of an entire state, to elect a person to that Senate. So you're talking millions of people have to come out and vote for that person to get in there. So the chances of getting a legitimate independent, or an anti-partisan, as I call it, into the Senate is really, really unlikely. But the House, on the other hand, every district is only about 700,000 people, right? And so you have 700,000 people. You apply the voter turnout, which is about 50% at most. So you're looking at 350,000 people come out to vote. You get plurality voting. All you really need is about 130,000 votes in 5 districts, and the parties no longer have control.
It's crazy.
You get those 700,000-800,000 votes across 5 districts. You get them elected to the House. Now they use that mansion-like, cinema-like swing vote power to say, all right, you want to pass legislation that does X, Y, and Z? All right, cool. Here's the deal. It's got to be under 100 pages. Okay. You want to pass that legislation? Okay, that's cool. It's got to include these reforms before we'll agree to pass it with you. Right. And so then you can slowly start to erode that partisan power by forcing legislation on them. And it starts at the election for the speaker. In January, they're going to elect a new speaker, and the Republicans are going to elect whoever they choose to elect because they don't have to depend on the Democrats. But if they have 217 votes, they're either going to have to find a way to convince the anti-partisans to go along with them to choose the speaker that the anti-partisans feel is a speaker that can start to bring the country together, or the Democrats can appeal to those independents, because if you got all 6 of their votes, then they can elect a speaker. And so you start to have this ability to say, all right, we want these committee assignments for these 6 people. We want this agenda required. And you know what? We want a speaker that is currently not serving in Congress and has never ran as a Republican or a Democrat for any office.
Well, the funny thing is they don't have to elect a congressman to be speaker. It could be anyone.
Anyone in the country.
They could say, hey, Ray, hey, Scott, hey, Lisa, whoever.
You don't want
you to
me
be
up there.
Speaker of the House.
Right.
But that's one
and
conspiracy theory.
Power.
Right. Yeah. One conspiracy theory was they were going to elect Trump to be
speaker. To
be speaker. And I thought, what if, for me, if Trump would have just shut the fuck up and just done his agenda, right? Then if he was just, it's not his personality, but I think if he would have just did his agenda, kind of like if people asked him questions, he just was like, yeah, everything's going great. Or whatever, he goes like this, or whatever his move is, or he goes like this. And then he just moved on. But I'm more interested, I'm more interested in being like a king maker versus being the king.
Right. You can't have someone as sensitive as Donald Trump. If you poke Donald Trump, he pokes you back.
Right.
And you can't be like that when you're president. You have to appear more presidential.
So
I would just
and you got to remember, Donald Trump got a lot of ego, man. It's all about him.
Well,
and
that's
again,
what it's about.
It's all about him.
I'm not a psychologist, but the dude seems, in my understanding of a narcissist, he meets the classic definition,
Oh, sure.
And that ego can't take a hit, it's just the way it is with narcissists.
If they were like Ray,
I grew up in New Jersey. Ray, you grew up in New Jersey. Sure. I don't know if Lisa and Rob, if you guys did or not.
We did.
But, so we grew up hearing about Donald Trump our entire lives.
Yeah. Exactly.
And even then, you either loved the guy or you hated him. Now, I tended to be on I never liked that braggadocious personality. And so I was kind of like, oh, this guy again.
Yeah.
But, it's not so much that he had bad policies or whatnot. He really didn't. I mean, let's be honest. Trump's policies weren't Trump's policies. Trump's policies were based on what his team thought was the right policy at the right time that's going to do the right thing. And he's just going to select from the choices that are given to him. And so from a manager perspective, take it or leave it. If they're the policies you like, then you probably overall prefer Trump. If they're the policies you don't like, then you found a reason to hate him. I think in a lot of ways.
I'm just hoping that whoever they elect next, I really hope it's not Biden because he's just too fucking old.
He's going to run again. It's scary, but he's going to run again.
He's fucking being hung up by marionettes. I can't with this guy.
It's very true.
To be honest with you, he's actually gotten more lively in the last year or so. Like when he was running, I was like, this guy is dosed. There's no way. Tell me I'm wrong. But the last year or so, he's actually gotten a little bit more lively. Like he has made less kind of what did he just say kind of moments, but
he's getting more comfortable in front of the camera, I guess.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe. I don't know. My concern, it goes back to, is I am really just not that interested in the presidential election as much as I am in who we get in Congress, because I know there is no POTUS we are ever going to elect that's going to actually put people over both parties. Right now, we can argue that Trump's policies were better for we the people than the Democrat policies were. I think there's a valid argument to be had there, and I think you can make some good rationale for why that's the case. But ultimately, if you agree that either party wants wants the other party to think like them, right? So the GOP says you should think like us. We represent America. And the Democrats are like, you should think like us. We represent America. Well, the reality is both of those concepts are totalitarian.
Yes.
Both of those concepts says if you think differently than me, you shouldn't exist in America, right? So the reality is America means you should be able to think that entire spectrum, right, and be supported by our government.
Of course.
Not denigrated by our government, And so the only way to really do that is to get the people who are supposed to represent us to actually represent us and not the parties that helped get them there. Because ultimately we don't have representatives of the people, we have representatives of the party.
Yep.
I think they complicate matters in a lot of ways too. I'm going to give you a recent New Jersey example. How do you have
a 1,000-page bill for anything?
It doesn't make any sense.
Because they don't read the bill anyway. No one's reading the bill.
Of course not.
Or there's a lot of bullshit.
It's all about who are we giving money to.
Yeah. But here's one that's very crystal clear, in my opinion.
Sorry.
Oh, it's great. Is that a Pez?
Oh.
Oh my God.
Where do you get this shit?
Like them, the phone ones. I have got Obama too. But Obama, we're not talking about Obama, so.
Here's a real New Jersey issue. So New Jersey, it's impossible that it was.
Fucking God, stop it.
Oh, that's great. Guys. There's Barack. Who makes those, Rob? What company?
I don't know. Someone got them online somewhere. Weekly Standard.
There you go. In New Jersey, no one could carry a gun. It was impossible to get a carry permit. Like right. you had to blow the chief of police, like whatever. Like it was like fucking nuts, right? To get that. So now they pass this law or this thing or whatever that the Supreme Court does it and everybody can get a gun. So what does New Jersey do? They find a way to make it, you get a gun, you need to have insurance. The permit went from $30 or $60 to $300. You need a specific insurance. You need training. You can't carry it in a restaurant. You can't carry it in a park. You can't carry it on the other side of the street. I'm making shit up, but you understand what I'm saying. They've made it to the point where it's like, and then everybody has to challenge that now. Well, when the people spoke, they elected Trump. Trump put justices into the Supreme Court, people that he picked, and those people said you can carry a gun. So now the Democratic Party in New Jersey has done all they could to make it impossible. All that does is means that everybody's got to get sued. So then lawyers will be involved.
Well, it's not that you're not allowed to have a gun, right? You have to have a gun under our conditions.
Under our conditions, right? And
so it's not like you have a gun that's in a reasonable way. It must be something that they can somehow control.
Well,
but that's where the people situation
Which say,
is.
Well, I was going to say the law in Pennsylvania, you can either have your marijuana license or your concealed carry license. You can't have both. It's one or the other.
Really?
Mm-hmm. So essentially, when I signed up for my marijuana license, I would have to surrender my firearm license.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Really?
And vice versa. So like if I wanted to get a gun and get my gun license, I would have to surrender my marijuana license to the state.
Interesting. So there's a thing, it's like a little trivia piece for you. There's a law out there called LEOSA. It's the Law Enforcement Officer Safety Act. And basically what it does is it's a federal law that says if you're retired federal law enforcement, you have the ability to carry a weapon in all 50 states, right? And the states can't stop you. That's basically the law. There was one state that I'm not sure if it's still to this day that insisted they would not recognize that law. Not that they had, like almost a sanctuary state against LEOSA, right? Saying that, no, we disagree. You're not allowed to carry here in this state. Guess which state that was?
New Jersey.
Yep.
Are you fucking kidding me?
No, nope.
It's so predictable. It's not even funny.
Oh my God.
And it's not like we don't have any crime.
That says we're not going to recognize LEOSA.
So what happens
now? I don't know if they still that way or not. I don't know. That was several years ago. But
so
yeah,
stupid. I can't.
it was
I'm
crazy.
done.
You know what's, Lisa? I'm thinking about this whole. You have to surrender either one card or the other card. You know, but yet you could still drink a beer and have a gun.
I don't make the fucking laws, bro.
Or you could drink a beer and smoke marijuana. I'm just saying, like, it's like, that's dumb. And I think most people who smoke weed probably aren't carrying it. They're like, yeah, dude, like, I'm just chilling the fuck out. You're not like, I'm going to smoke weed and go rob a bank.
As someone who avidly smokes weed, there's a lot of brain power and muscle moving with having to unlock the gun, making sure it's loaded. Like, there's a lot of steps for a stoner to go through that it's like not even worth it for them.
Yeah.
Speaking from a perspective, anyway.
Well, at least, I mean, am I right? Like, when you smoke, you're like, chill. You're not like, I'm gonna go rob a fucking bank
or go on
people.
A fucking rampage. Yeah, like, I'm not. No, you're relaxing. Like, it's. But I can understand, I guess, in a way. But you know, I see if you're going to prescribe somebody like a narcotic, then maybe they shouldn't have access to their weapon. That kind of thing I can understand, because you're getting prescribed a heavy dosage. You shouldn't have access to that kind of thing, because a lot of times it's going to have an opiate in it, and you're going to it's a different neurological thing. It's very, very different.
I mean, if they really wanted to fix it, they would have to really go down and fix the whole system, because there's so many people that have mental health issues that have firearms that may not be ready for them.
Exactly.
Or kids that buy them when they're 18 years old, that they already have a history, but no one checked. And no one does a background.
Here's common sense.
You got to remember that there's a lot of that in the world. There's a lot of people that have access to these. When you hear these kids, like, you know, doing these things with these mass shootings, that's what it's caused by.
What about black? But you got to consider the black market as well.
Of course.
Yeah, I think the vast majority of guns used in crimes are illegally acquired.
Sure.
Is that because of like serial numbers and shit, you think?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is part. I think the serial numbers plays a big role. They're just really difficult to get to legally. Like, you know, like they talk about the gun show loophole. I went to a gun show and it was like I didn't have a Texas driver's license yet, and they're like, "Cute, I can't sell you one here." I'm like, huh? Wow. How about that?
Texas,
I'm like,
too.
what about this gun show loophole? I'm here like, buy a gun, and they're like, no, you don't have a Texas license. Forget you. You can't do it.
I think the big issue with that is a straw man purchase, where, you know,
yes, huge. Yep, huge deal.
Grandma goes and buys 5 guns at the gun show and ships them to Baltimore, and they get sold to, you know, gangbangers in Baltimore. I think that's probably
gangbangers.
I don't know another name, you know what I mean? But that's probably a big. To me, I think anybody should. If you want to carry a gun, I think you should carry a gun. If you can get it, there should be no issue with getting a permitted gun. If you're carrying, I'm with you gun,
I'm with you on the mental health capacity.
But mental health is huge. I was just getting to that. I 100% agree with you.
But okay,
yeah,
I think we've talked about it. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Scott.
No, go ahead.
I think we've talked about it before on your podcast, right? The mental health has only I would say maybe the past 20 years, been really welcomed into acceptance in our society. So the fact that it's still, it's coming more into society as an acceptance factor, and everybody getting therapy is more of getting socially acceptable for people. But I think in terms of like a firearm standard, or even getting medicine from the doctors, any kind of weapon, if you really want to get into it, or even joining the military for that matter. Yes, you go through psychological testing, but I think there's deeper evaluations. I know I made a joke, Ray Scott, when I was through basic, I answered one of like a couple of questions wrong, and I had to go back in for psych evaluation to make sure I was okay.
Fucking hilarious.
Okay, she's good.
So like, I don't know. There's a lot of suicides in the military. There's a lot of suicide for veterans.
Yeah, hashtag 22, right?
So like,
yeah, it's terrible.
I mean,
so
I think the mental health kind of pandemic is still in its course.
Yeah. I think mental health is a massive issue. I won't even pretend to have an idea of how to fix that issue. But I will say this. I think the problem isn't that there are too many guns or that we shouldn't allow people to have guns. I think the problem is we have people that aren't responsible that have guns.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Whether those people aren't responsible because they have a mental health issue or because they're just irresponsible because they're using marijuana, whatever the reasons are, there are irresponsible people that have guns.
Yep.
And we don't want guns in the hands of irresponsible people. So the question becomes, how do you make people more responsible who are going to have guns? Now, I would say, let's take a lesson from the safe sex argument, right? The safe sex argument was we need to teach kids at a younger age in schools what safe sex is. Let's teach kids at a young age in schools what safe weapon handling is.
Sure.
And teach them and explain to them, here's the threats, here's what weapons are for, here's how you handle them correctly, and make sure people are actually trained so that if they do purchase a gun in their lives, they know how to be responsible with it. Because so often you get somebody who gets a weapon and they don't know. You want to keep it level and downrange. You want to make sure it's not going to be pointed at anything you aren't prepared to destroy. You want to make sure that they're always going to treat it like it's loaded. You want to make these fundamental rules second nature in people so that they their finger is always off the trigger until they're going to fire.
Yeah, I mean, I used to have a permit. I used to have a permit in New Jersey, by the way. So I had a carry permit in New Jersey, and you have to go through a course, and you have to qualify. By the way, you have to qualify to get a carry permit in New Jersey. I think the score. I think the score was 90%. I want to say it was 80 or 90% at the time. 100 rounds at the range. You got to go through like a classroom thing with them. And you go to the range and you got to do the one where you put your hand in front of your face and you shoot the target at 5 meters, 10 meters. You do all other hand, like just the same kind of things that you would go through for law enforcement, the same kind of thing. And once you get that, then you know, and in my opinion, the world needs more people that are able to carry a firearm and use it effectively. Because when something goes down in a Walmart, imagine if there were 15 people in there that were really trained to take care of shit. Or knew how to handle a firearm in the event they had the opportunity to do something.
I told you my story. I saw an E6 fire the fucking round at the shooting range before they said go. People and Master Sergeant, okay? Like, and I was a fucking senior airman firing this weapon. I shouldn't have been firing it, but I was only doing it because I work mobility. So there's people who are fucking old enough who are supposed to be responsible and mature enough, and they're just fucking... People thought he did it to get out of a deployment, which is probably true, but that's another story.
You never know.
But like, that's not cool. That was fucking scary.
Yeah, I will tell you. So I was probably 7, 8, and in Wayne, New Jersey, and my parents took me to the Police Athletic League. I don't even know if that's still a thing. To the Police Athletic League there in Wayne, and I shot for the first time. It was a .22 rifle. On an indoor range, and I remember thinking like, I'm good, thanks. You know what I mean? Like, I got the class, they told me how to do it, and I shot the rifle, and like bing bing. I mean, a .22 isn't a really powerful weapon at all, but I was like, I'm kind of good, and so I never really touched a weapon again until I went to basic training. And so, you know, you fast forward 11 12 years, and here I am with a I think I'm old enough, I'm pretty sure it was still an M16. And I remember feeling like that is way too easy. like it is way too easy. And this thing is I mean, like there was no major kick. It wasn't like it was like bam.
No,
it was like pop, pop, pop. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Right. And so I was never like excited about it. And you know, now I carry a weapon pretty much every day. But it's you know, in my mind, it's like a carpenter carries a hammer. I you know, go ask a carpenter how many of them like using their hammer. You know what I mean? It's like, do you love to go and just practice hitting nails into wood? And I'm gonna bet most of them say no, you know. And so I carry it, but I really don't. I don't particularly enjoy going and shooting the weapon. I know I have to retain proficiency, and I know I have to qualify, but it's not like a thing that I enjoy. You know what I mean? And I think it's totally fine if people like that as a hobby. I've got plenty of friends that do.
I mean, archery's a hobby. I mean,
exactly. I mean, if that's your thing, that's fine. But I'm willing to bet most of the, like 99.9% of the people that see, well, maybe that's a bad. I would say the real professional hobbyists are going to be very responsible handlers of weapons.
Yeah.
Right. There is certainly, I have no idea how much it could be, but there is certainly a group of people that are hobbyists with weapons that probably shouldn't have them.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Of course. Also, yeah, remember the other piece about the weapons is there's a lot of places in the country that don't have, like, Hamilton has their own police, right? But there's a lot of rural places that don't have their own police.
I don't. So my town doesn't have its own.
So sometimes you need to be able to defend yourself. When something happens, you can't pick up 911. It might take 18 minutes for the state police to get out to your place. Now, it's not usually that long because I have a nephew now who's in the state police. But the point is that you do need a way to protect yourself. So I think a great number of those are people who have them. Whether they're qualified to shoot them is irrelevant. They have them because it's their right to have them. But it is their primary home defense, I would say.
Actually,
no question. But like you guys are going to end up having to cut this entire part out for YouTube, won't you?
Why?
Will YouTube allow this much talk about weapons?
Well, listen, I post everything, and I don't give a fuck.
There you go.
No, we're talking about getting licensed. We're talking about going and getting training
legality
classes. We're talking legally how to do it.
I think this. I think this. I want to go back to still talk about this, but the mental health aspect of this.
Yeah.
But I also want to talk about the fact that something that Rob just said. If someone breaks into your home and you're a gun owner, I'm not going to say if I am or if I'm not. And if you want to get surprised in the middle of the night, you can come and visit me. That should be close.
Solid statement.
That should be close to the. That should be close to the answer. But what I'm saying is can you take a life when you have that gun in your hand? It's a lot fucking harder than people think watching on TV with guys shooting guns and doing whatever like that. If that person's standing in front of you, right, no matter how scared you are or how mad you are or whatever the case may be, can you shoot that fucking person?
Yes.
Yes.
100%. Because you know what the worst thought is? Him killing my family. That's the worst. And I lived through it. No, hell yes. Yes.
Rob, here's why I say this. How many are you? And I'm going to say this because I'm playing devil's advocate here a little bit too.
Okay.
You took a training class. Okay.
Yeah.
Lisa, you know how to fire a gun. You were in the Air Force. Scott, you know how to fire a gun. Air Force. Right. How many people, they get the gun. They say, I'm going to use this to protect my house. Mm-hmm. All right. I'm pro Second Amendment. I think everybody should have a fucking gun. That's my opinion. But I said, I'm going to protect my house with this. And then they never go and they never shoot the gun.
Well, that's their fault. I mean, that's their fault. I mean, you don't buy a guitar, put it in the corner of the room and never play it unless you're a tool, right? I mean,
Great analogy, right? So now somebody breaks in their house, right? And you have to confront that person that breaks in your house. And I'm going to share a personal story on this because it's an interesting story. You have to confront that person that has broken into your house. All right. And it's dark. You're scared. You're an accountant. You're not a fucking cop. Right. Or whatever it is. And you've taken an 8-hour training class on firing that gun. Right. Can you do it? And I don't know if every single person can do it. And I relate this to a story where I was.
Well, we're talking carry permits here. We're talking carry permits. When you take a carry permit class, you have to really know how to use it. You can't qualify, and you can't accidentally qualify 90 out of 100 shots on a Q target. On a Q target, it's not a center deal with points. It's a Q. So as long as you hit the Q, it counts.
Knowing how to use the gun and using the gun are two separate things. So
yeah, you're getting more to the emotional
aspect of it,
not just physically being able to.
I don't know if the gun is the first thing I bring down. A gun is like it's either a threat or it's not. Where you could have a bat, you can have a lot of different other weapons in your house that are a lot more effective. If there's 4 guys in your house, if you have a baseball bat, you could take them all out of your house. I mean, you're not going to kill them all instantly, but you could defend yourself against 4 guys versus trying to shoot 4 guys, right? You can't really shoot 4 guys.
Especially if it's fucking dark.
We had it. Yeah. I was at the gym one day, right? And
story time with Ray.
This was a while back. I was at the gym. I was working out, and I get a call from my younger daughter, Emma. Hysterical. Someone has broken into the house, and I dialed 911. So I said, okay, I'm heading back. I'll be over there. Right. So I get to the house.
How fast did you drive? How fast did you drive to your house?
Bro, fast as fuck. Right. I get to the house. It's the middle of the day. It's like fucking 9 o'clock in the morning. Right. Who the fuck's breaking in my house at 9 o'clock in the morning? Right. I call my other son, Chase, who's younger. And I said, Chase, just stay in your room. He goes, I don't know what's going on. He goes, I hear fighting, but I think Austin, my other son, has confronted this person and is now fighting this person. I was like, what the fuck is happening? So I get to my house, and I'll never forget this feeling. I put my hand on the doorknob, right? And I said, I'm prepared to die to make sure that, and all I had was a flashlight, right, in my hand. That's all I had in my truck. I had a fucking flashlight, right? Like this long. I said,
bro, you need a mag light. You need to fucking pop this motherfucker on the head.
Yeah, really. Can we get like, I mean, can't you just go get a knife like this? I mean, can you get a knife like this? This is just a regular pocket knife. I mean, you know, I'd be okay with this.
I could hear the sirens. I could hear the sirens in the background. I said, I am prepared to die to make sure that nothing happens to my kids. I said, whoever's in this fucking house is going to get a fucking beating, but I may die. I open the door. I go inside. I don't hear anything. I'm like, all right, where's this motherfucker at? Right. So then my son, my older son, comes down the stairs. He's covered in blood. I'm like, what the fuck is happening? I turn around and I see one of my son's friends, my older son's friends, in the house. And I said, hey, person's name, what the fuck are you doing here? And he goes, I slept here overnight, right? No one knew. And then he said, this kid's a nice kid, but he's a handful. And he has an argument with my older son. And they're fighting. In the meantime, no one knew that this guy and his girlfriend actually was there too, had slept at the house overnight. No one knew.
I can't.
Right? So we thought that he broke in. In the meantime, my son had let him sleep overnight in the house with his girlfriend because they were drunk. These other two, the girlfriend and my older son, didn't want them to drive. So he said, you could just spend the night. But when he woke up in the morning, the boy was belligerent and decided that he wanted to fight my older son. And so they fought. In the meantime, now there's like cops running into my fucking house, right? Because no one knew what was going on. No one knew what the fuck was happening. But everything was calm and everybody was calm. Nobody got arrested. I said, look, we're not pressing charges on this boy here. It's a misunderstanding situation. They need to leave. He called an Uber or whatever. And I think the kid might have still been drunk from the night before, but whatever happened. In the meantime, my son ends up fighting this kid at that time. He gets, they were both bruised up, but he had broke my son's, over here on his nose, which made him bleed a lot. But that's how the story ended. But during that story, I was literally prepared to die. Now, I don't know if every person who owns a gun.
Do you think that was an emotional response because your children were inside?
100%. If somebody broke into my house and I was there by myself, I'd be like, dude, like, what the fuck are you doing? But I was ready to like lay it down to make sure that those three kids could get out of the house. You know what I mean? Yeah. I was ready to do that. Right. I will say shout out to the police that responded. They were there relatively quickly, super, super professional. They understood the story of what happened and everything was good.
Well, I'm glad it was just a misunderstanding.
When you're a gun owner, that's it. Are you prepared? What if that was a bad guy? Are you prepared you have to be prepared to die yourself.
Of course.
Right. And that's the mental aspect of it.
And I think so much of it too is you do have gun owners and even police I think it's a much lower percentage than people think. But there's bad people in everything, right? Sure. And there's cops that make bad decisions and whatnot. But I think gun owners in general, right? There is a segment of that population that is excited for the excuse, right?
Yeah.
So
Sure.
just because you can justify doesn't mean you should use. Is the case. So like I've had 2 use of force situations in my career. One, I was being attacked. I was being ran after and attacked with a cane, right? A metal cane.
Interesting.
So in theory, I am totally it's an intermediate weapon I'm being attacked with. One up. Certainly, if my life is being threatened, I should be able to use lethal force if needed to stop the act. But the reality was, I did not feel like my life was being threatened. It turns out that the person holding the cane and running at me was over 60 years old. I had cover mere feet away that I was able to get in. So why would I take this person's life when the situation is controlled by other law enforcement in the area? The person's not going anywhere. And so the threat to my life is eliminated if I take cover.
I think you're making a strong point about just to do it.
Yeah.
I think that's a really strong analogy, because I don't think a lot of people, Ray and Uncle Rob, I'm not speaking about you guys specifically, but I know from a military training perspective, you're supposed to, like, in that kind of situation, in a firearm situation, you're really problem solving. Like, is it absolutely necessary for me to use a deadly force? Right. Is there something else? Like, do I have support? Am I alone? Do I have cover? Like all these little nitty gritty things. A lot of nuance
in everything, right? There's a lot of nuance. But I can also understand in a situation, especially at 5'5", if I'm getting beat up by somebody and I feel them reaching for my weapon and they have no weapon at all, right? Then it may be in that situation, the right answer is lethal force, to make sure that the action stops, because I do fear for my life. And so a lot of it comes down to is do you have a legitimate fear for your life, a reasonable fear? And so, what you saw, like with the was it Rittenhour, right? Is that his name?
Yeah.
Rittenhour.
Rittenhouse.
Rittenhouse. That's it. Right. What you saw with that case is, did he have a reasonable fear for his life in those instances where he fired a weapon? Now you can debate the fact that maybe he should never have been there at all, and 100%. He never would have feared for his life.
100%.
But if in the situation where he was legally allowed to be, if he reasonably feared for his life, then certainly you can use lethal force in that situation.
But poor judgment. There's a common thread with all these horrible firearm stories and all these horrible tragedies, and the one common thread is there is usually a really blatant thing that they'll do that you shouldn't do. There's a no that you don't do.
Well, it's like that case in Georgia. Yeah, like they stalked that guy for how long? I mean, they never needed to do that.
No, I mean? Because you have a gun on you doesn't mean that's the first thing. That should be the last thing you should use.
I agree.
In your house, first of all, when you wake up in the middle of the night, in my opinion, a firearm ain't the best thing. That's why a bat's a little better. Because you could be a little groggy and be effective with a bat. I don't know, if you just woke up from a dead sleep and now you got to be shooting a firearm a minute later,
and then in the middle of the night in the dark.
It's a very selective situation.
And the bigger thing, and this is like something I have to think through, because so this is one of the new things, Ray, is we're living in an RV right now, right? And so you don't have to just think about how your weapon is going to be used if somebody breaks in. You have to think about where it's going to travel after.
That's very true.
That's a good point too.
I don't care what house you're in. A round of fire is going to exit your house if it doesn't impact the target correctly, and it doesn't impact the target in mushroom to the point where it stops it from going on. And so if you have people who are defending their house with an AR and they're using ball ammo, well, that thing is going to travel through 6 or 7 people. You know what I mean? I'm exaggerating, but still, if that round is going to travel. Now, if you buy a round that is specifically designed to mushroom and stop, and you're looking at the ballistic testing on it, and you can see after initial impact it's only going to travel another 4 or 5 inches, and it's going to transfer that energy to the target. All right, now you've got a better round that's maybe designed for home defense. But a lot of people aren't thinking through the fact that if I fire a round in an RV and I miss, what's beyond that RV that I'm putting at risk, and whatnot.
Do you want to live in an RV? Is this like part of this next journey in your life, or no?
Yeah, we aren't destitute. It's not quite Cousin Eddie's RV. No, it's not quite Cousin Eddie. No, so
so it's like Cousin Eddie, Walter White. Like we're like teeter tottering. Okay,
neither one. We got the assignment to come back east, and we moved in May of this year. Okay. And we felt like we were at pretty much the top of the market. So we sold our house in Texas.
Smart.
And we moved out here, and we looked at the market here, and feeling like it was the top of the market and a place we didn't want to retire. And I'm eligible to retire in less than 2 years. I'm like, I don't want to buy a house and find out I can't sell the house. And now we're stuck living in the mid-Atlantic. And so we had an RV, and we have a friend that's got property with hookups. And he was willing to host us on his land, which happens to be 20 minutes from where I work.
It's great.
And it's counter commute. So it ended up being kind of a dream scenario. And so we tried it out for a couple months in our old RV, and it proved really like it was going to work out. So we upgraded the RV to what we have now, which, if you wanted to look it up, it's a Discovery LXE 40M. We're not struggling. It's a nice little RV. We're pretty happy. It's 40 foot long. Can
I have the model number again, please?
40M, as in Mary.
Discovery.
Yeah, Discovery LXE.
Rob's really going to look this up, and he's going to say,
I sure am. I'm going to give you my. It's kind of like my little thing. I like off the grid stuff.
I would totally, Scott, 100% do that. I would have.
No, it's great. I mean, so we pay electric. We were trying to give our buddy some money a month, and he didn't want anything to do with it because he doesn't. He's a lot like me. He's going to be very honest, and so he doesn't want to have to report income on taxes and whatnot. Sure. He doesn't want to have extra income. So it's like, no, just stay here, help me out around the property. And so that's what I do. I help him around the property. We got a nice little place to stay. I'm 20 minutes from the office. I'm 2 years away from retirement. And like I said, we're the other RV was propane heat, and we would have been really struggling in the winter in the old RV. But this one, like, we're very cozy. It doesn't use propane.
That's a nice RV, Scott.
Well, it's not. So it's a 2020. You could probably
tell me what it is. A 2020?
Yeah, it's a 2020 Discovery LXE 40M.
Okay.
So one of my dreams that I've always wanted to do is I've always wanted to, get an RV, live in like New York State or something like that for the summer. Where the weather's cool and it's nice and it's beautiful.
Right.
And then as soon as there's an inkling of fucking south,
gone.
Snowbird.
Yep. No, I'm with you. Yeah, so I have this retirement idea with the RV that I want to do, which is I want to travel all 48 contiguous states.
Nice.
In 48 months. I want to spend 1 month in every state.
That's a good idea.
And I want to do it chasing 70 degrees or 80 degrees. That 70 to 80 sweet spot. And try to spend a month in every state in that time frame, to where you're getting that time, and really see which is really the state I'd like to retire in. Because we're technically, so there's a weird thing in the law, and so that's almost exactly our RV as far as the outside is concerned. Yeah, it looks just like that.
Look at this guy.
This is Matt's RV reviews, by the way. We watched a lot of Matt's RV's reviews and picking out the RV that we wanted to get.
Oh, we should get this guy on the podcast, Rob. This would be fun to talk about RVs and that would be a lot of fun.
So, so that's the idea. It's kind of like I could do this 48 state kind of thing.
I love
figure
that
out
idea.
Which one is really the one I want to retire. But because we didn't buy or rent a home, we technically never left Texas as a residency. So the way the law works is you reside in the state, your residency stays in the state that you last had a residence.
Oh, that's great.
Right. And
he's not going to make it up the ladder.
No,
believe it or not, he makes it.
He's pretty fucking spry. He looks like a spry guy.
He's a spry. He's a little spider monkey.
Yeah.
Right. And so we're still Texas residents. We have a Texas address still. There's an RV club called Escapees. And so we're members of this RV club where we have an address through them. They forward our mail to wherever we happen to be RVing. So we do this 48 state thing. They'll send us our mail wherever we're at any
Oh my
time.
God, that's fucking awesome.
That's awesome.
It's amazing. It's like $100 some bucks a year. And it's like the greatest thing. And they'll even scan the insides of the envelopes if you need something quickly enough.
That's great.
And they'll show you kind of like, this is what's in your mailbox right now. Do you want to get rid of this or do you want us to forward it, type of a deal?
Oh, that's pretty cool. I've always wanted to do something like that. I think it's great. I rented an RV once and drove to Florida, had a really good experience. This is when I only had one kid or two kids. This was many years ago, and had a really nice experience with it. And I would totally do it.
All digital, huh?
Yeah, look at that. Yeah.
All digital. That's pretty cool.
That was why we wanted a 2020 or newer. So it kind of worked out that the sweet spot is the 20. In my humble opinion, no offense to anybody who bought a 21 or a 22 RV, but in my humble opinion, the 2020 is the sweet spot because it gets the newer chassis, which has all the digital and whatnot like that. That's the first year of that stuff, but you don't get any of the COVID. You don't get any of the COVID built products. So the 21s and 22s were all built during COVID, and where they had shortages and they kind of had to figure things out when they couldn't get stuff in. And a whole lot of people were going full-time RV because it was the only way you could stay in your house and go do things. So a lot of people jumped into the RV world because they wanted to avoid some of the lockdown frustrations.
That makes a lot of sense.
So the 2020 was that sweet spot where you could still get it because ours came off the assembly line in November of 2020, right before COVID started out or kicked off, basically.
I think it's cool. I thought about remodeling one. I thought about you could get these things cheap, especially you have to worry about if yours is a class A, right?
Oh my
so
God, it's beautiful.
It's beautiful. So you have to worry about engine and stuff like that. But even like if you got like a towable or a fifth wheel and you remodel the inside of it, you could get those things for really inexpensive if you're willing to do some work on it.
So we had a class A before. Now it was a 2011,
right?
And it was a bunkhouse model, which was part of the issue. We didn't really want a bunkhouse model anymore. The slides aren't open yet. What you're saying right now,
yeah.
But it was a bunkhouse model. It didn't have the 4-season kind of thing. It was really more of a weekender kind of coach. So it really got cold when it was like we were camping in like 40-degree weather for a week, and we ran out of propane. It was a full bottle, and we ran through a bottle of propane in a week at 40 degrees. So we knew right away that we were going to have to do a different coach if we decided to do it in winter. And so this one has like heated floors, and it's got a fireplace that actually puts out heat, and it's got this thing called an aqua hot that works like a boiler system in a house. So instead of using propane, it uses electric burner and a diesel burner. So it'll burn diesel fuel to heat the water in the boiler, and the boiler heats the house. And it's got, tons of insulation over what the other coach did. And so we've been quite cozy. We've gotten down into the 20s.
It's beautiful. Look at this guy.
He's kind of nuts.
Yeah, he's
he loves RVs.
Yeah.
Like I said, I've always been interested.
But I was going somewhere. I totally forgot. We sold that one for like $39,000. That was a 2011.
Really?
And still in great shape. It's still, it still served its purpose and could do all the things it was supposed to do. But it was 11 years old, and 39, and it was out the door basically. So yeah, and a remodel on that would have looked great.
Can I ask what size bed you have?
It's king.
Yes.
Damn.
Yeah, that was one of those must-haves because we were in a queen in the last one. Okay. And we're like, no, this one's gonna have to have a king in it.
I also wanted to ask you one thing. You don't have to answer if you can't. Were you an OSI?
So I was OSI for the Air Force veterans. They know what that is, and they usually get that kind of like but I ended up in aircrew life support, which wasn't too terrible. I did that for like 6 years, and then for the last 6.5, and then the last 6.5 years I was active duty in OSI. Yeah.
Okay. Because when Ray was telling me about your job in the Air Force, I was like, oh, he was probably OSI. Like that's initially what came to my head. And
Yep.
I know Ray was being sarcastic, but I was medically discharged. I was material management for 5 years in England, and I was deployed to the deed, LU deed. And what was I gonna say? I was material management, and I hurt my back in deployment, so I was medical discharge.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. I was always jealous of the OSI guys because they got to wear civvies all the time.
Civvies.
Yeah,
I
was always
I
jealous.
can't tell you how many people come into their interview to try to become OSI agents, and you ask them why they want to be it, and it's like, so I can wear civilian clothes, and it's like, probably not the
Really?
right answer. Probably not the right answer.
What does OSI stand for, Scott?
Office of Special Investigations.
Now, do you investigate, or is it mainly crimes in the Air Force?
So, this is where I'll remind everybody that the opinions you've heard are my personal opinions. And
No, you don't have to give me
reflect,
specific cases, but is it
to represent anything that my employer would any of their positions. But no, so so the way it works, right? But be it Air Force or the Navy or even the Army, and theirs is a little bit different setup, is you have your traditional kind of security forces type thing that handle the more misdemeanor or lower level crimes. And then there for felony level crimes that affect the Air Force, that's OSI's role. Same thing with like NCIS. You guys have seen the TV show NCIS. That's basically OSI. It's just for the Air Force.
Hold on, wasn't OSI when Oscar Goldman, wasn't he the one that when Steve Austin, he was in charge of OSI, right?
Not Steve Austin, but
Oscar Goldman was in charge of OSI. He was the boss of OSI.
Absolutely. Yep. It was
funny. When I watch bad TV, watch an old $6 million man show. It's really bad.
One of the things I love about OSI is when I first came in, so I was a staff sergeant at the time. I first got into OSI. We did this thing, a newcomers briefing, where we would brief new people to the base about OSI, and we're good people. You can come talk to us, I swear, kind of briefing. And we at the time we had I was at a base where the vast majority of the population on the base were civilians. They weren't active duty people. We had like 16,000 civilians that worked on the base, and only about 2,000 or 3,000 active duty people at the time. This was like 1996, 1997 timeframe. And because they were civilian, they'd worked there for a long time. They were about my age now, a lot of them. I used to use we had a newcomers video that I could just kind of like throw in the VCR. There's a way back term.
There you go.
Right. That I could just throw in the VCR and kind of introduce them to OSI. And our command had actually reached out to Richard Anderson, and Richard Anderson did the newcomers video for OSI. So he was the guy that played Oscar Goldman. And it started out with this kind of thing. Is like, some of you may know me from the hit TV show, The $6 Million Man. That's where great. I played the head of an agency called OSI. And he goes, well, I'm here to tell you, the OSI is real.
That's funny.
And I just absolutely loved it. And like none of the OSI people that come in today know anything about even the $6 million man, sure. let alone that he was part of OSI. But yeah, it was a really great time. I enjoyed that quite a bit.
So I've known you since high school. When you were in high school and you first joined the Air Force, did you think you'd be in it as a lifelong career, or was it just like, hey, no. I need something to do for 4 years until I figure out what to do?
I mean, I knew I wanted, so I had delayed enlisted as a junior. So it was in between my junior and senior year in high school. I delayed enlisted to the Air Force. So I knew my senior year that I was going to be going into the Air Force. And I think a lot of it was I knew it would kind of like at least kind of prepare me for something, like it was at least a career. If my mom ever listens to this, part of this was, it was just the two of us in the house. We were divorced, and I was like, I need to get on my own before one of us kills each other, type of a thing. Sure. There was an element of that, I won't lie. But I think that was like, I knew that was the surest way I was going to be able to figure out what to do in life.
Yeah.
I had kind of hoped that it would put me into a career that would set me up for life. I didn't know what that was going to be, but I ended up going open general because when I initially went in,
Oh, you went in open general.
I did, but I wanted to be I wanted to be a computer programmer, right? So
Oh, wow. Okay.
I was into computers. I was like, I want to be a computer guy. Computers are cool, type of a thing. And I'm like, so I want to do that. And so the recruiter tells me, he's like, well, you got to take this test. I think it was called the Electro Data Processing Test, or EDPT. And he says, you're going to do fine. He says, it's all about computers. And I'm like, sweet. If it's about computers, I'm your guy. This is 1989. Computers were not nearly or 1988, actually, when I took the test, were not nearly as sophisticated. I mean, the internet wasn't out yet. You know what I mean? And so it was, can you put pieces of hardware together and make a computer work and work, and work basic software. And I did some programming in what was called BASIC at the time. And I think I even learned Pascal, which is a dead language. I think died probably before even 1988. In any event, I'm like, I'm a computer guy. This is going to be great. And so I get there and it turns out like, I start looking at questions and it's like, what is a CPU? And I'm like, I can do that. What is a hard drive? It's like, I can do that. I don't even think hard drives existed, but they were simple questions along that line. And then I flipped the page and it was like, all right, how do you solve this trigonometry problem? how do you solve this calculus? When you convert binary to, I'm like, whoa. And so it was way out of my league. And I ended up, you needed a 71 on the test. To be a programmer, you needed a 69 to be data entry. Okay. Now I frame it in that way to show you that there is a vast difference between a 69 and a 71. So it's not like you got 71 answers correct out of 100. It's this weird kind of math percentile that works similar to the ASVAB kind of thing.
Sounds like it, yeah.
Right. And so you needed a 69 to be able to do data entry. You needed a 71 to be able to do programming. I got a 70.
Of course you did.
He's like, so you can wait until, right? He's like, you can wait until you can test again and see if you can get that 71, or you can wait until a data programmer option comes in, or you can go open general. And I'm like, I don't want to be data programming. I don't want to be data entry. So I went in open general.
When you go in, I was in the Army for a very, very short-lived Army career, which I love to share my stories about. But when you say open general, like you just went in and they assigned you like
a job, yeah. So you didn't get categories. To pick the job. I want to say it's called Mage, if I remember. So my son did this in 2016. He went into the Air Force, right? And so they have this thing called a Mage score, where your ASVAB is converted to Mage, and Mage is like your mechanical, administrative, general, and electro environmental, or something like that. I want to say it's something along those lines.
He's right. I concur.
Yeah. And so so you can go in open into any one of those fields if you qualify for those fields, right? So based on your scores, if you had a high mechanical score, but you had low administrative, general, or in electrical scores, you could go open mechanical. All right.
Right.
So my option was open general
also.
Right. So I was able to go in open general, which meant my scores were high enough in the general category, but probably not sufficiently high in the mechanical, administrative, or electrical categories that they gave me the other options, basically. Right.
Did you get to choose when you were there, like through a list of general? Okay.
Yeah. They said, here's the jobs that are open. You can choose from these. So it wasn't like, okay, here's all the jobs. You can choose one of these. It was, here's the jobs where we need people. Which one do you want? And so I ended up taking aircrew life support, which was a fairly good job. I mean, it was on the flight line, but it wasn't part of maintenance. It was part of ops technically. So you were really kind of part of getting the aircraft loaded with survival equipment. And it was kind of the first chance I had to talk in front of people, because they also taught how to use the survival equipment on the plane. And so the aircrew had to come through our office every year and get recurring training on the use of the survival equipment that's on the aircraft. And then we also were kind of like sister career fields with survival instructors, which are the ones that actually teach escape, evade, survive, escape. What's the word? No, it's survive, evade, recover.
That's what I was going to ask.
Resist, escape.
Did you
survive,
teach SEER?
Evade, resist, escape? SEER. right?
Did you go through SEER training at all?
Yeah, so I went through all the
Holy
survival
shit.
courses. So that's your basic survival with resistance training, and then I went through Arctic survival, and I went through water survival, both in the pool and then the actual under the canopy water survival courses. Also, that you could participate in the recurring survival training at your base. Basically. So the air crew would come
You're
through.
a tough motherfucker. That's what he's just told us. If you guys were wondering what he said I'm a tough motherfucker. That's
what I was thinking.
Now, I may have cried for a lot of that.
But that's fair.
That's fair.
Now, I might ask you a personal question you totally don't have to answer.
The personal ones are easier to answer. Say again?
Were you waterboarded?
I was not.
Okay.
I was not. In fact, I don't think I had ever heard of the term when I went through, but I will tell you, it was surprisingly realistic.
Really?
When I went to survival school. Yeah, it was surprisingly realistic. Like I'm assuming everything they did to us, they were allowed to do.
Okay.
I was surprised with what they did to us. Yeah, okay. I was like, wow, that's legal? Okay. And we've not run any cases on them since that I've seen anyway. So I suspect they were allowed to do everything they did. But I'll tell you, there is hands down to this day, I've got my master's degree. And so whether you talk about the academy to become an agent, whether you talk about, my bachelor's or master's degrees programs, hands down, the most effective training I've ever been a part of was the survival training. Hands down. You learn so much. I mean, not just about survival, but about yourself. Like, just wow. I mean, there's just no other kind of context I can imagine where I would have had the ability or the opportunity to be so introspective about situations you never think you're going to find yourself in, and so appreciative of what you have in life. You know what I mean? And you see what some of these people who have been prisoners of war, you get just this inkling of what they had to go through for this fraction of a time that they had to go through it. And it is life-changing for just that little bit, for just that few time, for just that small time. And you see like McCain, where he was a captive for 4 years?
Yeah.
It's just like, every limb in his body. Like, how? There's just a level of you gain just enough of an understanding. It's like, I appreciate so much not ever having had to deal with that. But it was life changing for sure.
Would you I mean, I've heard first of all, I used to want to be refueling in the air. That's what I used to want to do.
Oh yeah, the air refuel. Yeah,
that's what
boom
I wanted.
Operator.
Boom operator. But I failed my depth perception, so they said fuck you. But then I realized you had to go through.
These are really expensive planes. We'd like you to be able to know.
Yeah, to make sure you get in the hole. Like, totally makes sense. I get you. I'm and I dated a guy who was POL, so I understood the whole refueling, the importance of refueling. But because I was going to cross train, because in supply, I hurt my back. I was trying to cross train and look at other career fields. And I already told Ray this, but for a small portion, I worked for the SARC or Sapper, whichever you want to refer to.
Yeah.
And I was actually training the entire base. I shot an AFN commercial.
Cool.
I was really, really all about that. But so I got to step out of my career field a little bit. But when I was kind of going through the jobs, and I was like, oh, maybe I'll take the depth perception test again. They're like, oh, you think you might have to go through SEER training? I'm like, yeah, no, I'm fucking good. No, I'm good. I've heard enough about SEER training. I'm okay.
Yeah.
I'm okay.
I will tell you, when I went through, because they don't really want you talking about. Now, I went through in 93, I heard 94.
Yeah, it's like kept under close.
They really don't want you talking about what you saw, but I will tell you, I was glad I was not a female going through it.
Okay. I believe that would be hard.
Yeah.
I was definitely, because you got to think about it. Like, regardless of anything that would be done to any person in that situation, you got to think about the psyche of of what effect it has on a population of people where you've got like, let's say 10 men and 1 woman, right? What role could a captor use that woman for that could impact all 10 of them?
Oh,
You know what I
sure.
mean?
Yeah,
It starts to make you go like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So I'm definitely glad I was, it is one of those things where you recognize that you are sometimes born into situations that are in different situations beneficial to you just because you were born a certain way. You
Oh,
know what I mean?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It does make you realize that it's like, wow, you know, this could be really tough otherwise.
Yes.
I think I think when you do something really hard, you have to do things that are hard for you to appreciate the things that you have that are easy. It also makes things easier overall in general. So it's like going to the gym. When we were sitting around with Mike Matissa last night, Mike was in great shape. He still got six-pack abs.
That guy
You know what I
still
mean?
looks like he's in high school, doesn't he? I mean,
And
like,
it's fucking crazy, right? It's
it's like
fucking
he
crazy.
he hasn't aged a bit.
Well, younger wife, I think that's what happens. But
Yeah.
he looks great. So I said, oh, I go to the gym, I do whatever. And and he goes, it's funny, you work out a lot, but I don't see it.
That wasn't the statement. Right? The statement was
trying to be, he was pretty,
he said, funny. Man, I thought you'd be bigger for working out twice a day.
Right. But for me, which is true, right? But for me, I don't care about how I look. I care about the things that I do when I have to do all day long are easier. So if it's whether it's picking up sheetrock or it's doing this or it's doing whatever, that's very, very easy for me to do now because I've suffered through every day of going to the gym and doing things that are harder. I think that people overall really need to do that more. And I think it makes you feel grateful for the things that you have. Like when you look at someone who's a POW or someone who's been through that type of stress or trauma, everything else around him must taste a little bit sweeter.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it has
so,
to,
that's the extreme level. The level that I have is I want to lift something heavy. So when it's time for me to lift something not as heavy as what I just lifted, I'm like, oh, I got this. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's my theory behind it. If the side effect is, oh, I've gained some weight and my mental health is better and I feel strong and I look good, great. That's awesome. Yeah. But the benefit for me is I'm functional. Like I'm able to do the daily things, more functionally. So Scott, I will say this. Thank you for humoring me and coming on the podcast again. I really, really appreciate it.
Pleasure to meet you, and thank you for your
great
service.
Meeting you. Absolutely, and thank you for yours.
Thank you.
Thank you both, guys. I really think about that. You guys did make a big sacrifice. Scott, I looked at a picture of you when you were like in high school, and like you were a real baby face, man. Like same thing with me, but like I was, and then I saw this one that you shared with me on the past podcast where you were, when you first joined, I was in the Army for a short period of time. When you first joined, they take a picture of you in, like they just put the top of the dress uniform on you, right? And they said, this is the picture we're going to send to your mom when you die. That's all right. I said, that's fine.
At least they sugared it. They sweetened it up when I was in. They say, we're going to send this to your family so they know you're alive.
Yeah. No, this was due to fucking death. This is what we're sending your mother.
And you're like on 2 hours of sleep. You look like death. Yeah. Uh-huh.
But I thought about that. And Scott, you look like such a kid. And I saw
I
saw terrible. Brian Reeves's too. We got to get Brian Reeves on the podcast. He's another, like a real baby face, Brian was a couple years older when he went in. He was like in his early, probably 20, 21, but the same thing. And I said, these are the people who made a major sacrifice in their life so that I could do this stupid fucking podcast. And I could say whatever the fuck I want to say. And I don't care. And I thank both of you for doing that.
Yeah, no, I mean, truly, I look back and I don't think I thought of it like I'm making a sacrifice. I really don't. I mean, I really looked at it like I think I explained it, like this is going to get me a GI Bill. This is going to give me opportunities. And I think a lot of times for a lot of people, the service aspect of it is kind of a part you recognize and you're willing to do. I mean, for some people, that's entirely why they do it. But I think it's also something you start to really appreciate as you're doing it.
I agree.
You know what I mean?
Mhm.
You know,
I appreciated it more as I was in, and it
Yep.
became more about sacrifice while I
Yep.
was in. I joined
Absolutely.
for a selfish reason. I joined
I think
to
that's true for me
benefit
as well.
myself. I joined to help me become a better person and to shape me
Yeah.
into a better person. And it did. But as my time grew, like you're saying, I grew
Yep.
an appreciation and an admiration for it. Like I appreciate the sacrifice that all of these people are making. That, what is it, like
Yeah.
less than 1% of the American
Yeah.
population?
And it's and I tell people that, you know, it's been a privilege because I think I have gotten out so much more from the opportunities I've been given by serving than I could have ever given
I agree.
in the process of serving. You know what I mean? And so it's you know, I you know, I occasionally get those thank yous and I really appreciate it. And I think most veterans appreciate it. But more often I just feel like I should be the one saying thank you.
Yeah, agreed.
And on that note, thank you both for being on the podcast. If you like the podcast, find us on YouTube, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I think we're getting pretty close to 5,000 views right now, which is super, super exciting. I attribute all the love to Lisa and Rob's hard work and Rob yelling at me to do stuff that in the past I never did on the podcast. I didn't edit this shit. I didn't do anything. So with Rob around and Lisa around, it's become definitely definitely a much better production. So I am super excited. Like, subscribe, follow. Scott, thank you very much. And everybody, look forward to talking to you guys again.